Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Wednesday's edition, and we're broadcasting here from Southern California and from the great state of Texas, just west of Austin. Richard Battle, welcome back to Schaftlein Report. So happy to have you back on the show today.
Mark, thank you, and it's our privilege and pleasure to be with you today.
Hey Richard, we had elections last night, okay, and I don't think there was any surprises in any of them. Give me your perspective on them, because I know you're a rock solid conservative. You've written books about it. You speak about it. We had a situation last night where we had one Republican defeated, another advanced, and a former vice presidential candidate that moved forward. What are your thoughts on Wyoming and Alaska last night?
Well, I think what's really interesting to me is the misread by the non-Trump faction of the Republican Party. And it reminds me of how the media and the public misread Rush Limbaugh when he came on the scene, and everybody thought that he indoctrinated people when all he did was reinforce what people already believed. And I think there's the same misread with regard to President Trump. I think people believe they follow him when, and in fact, there's millions of people who have believed in American primacy, and Donald Trump has been the candidate who has advanced that, and he's exposed not only the Democrats but Republicans who are swamp dwellers doing that. And so when we see Liz Cheney last night, her speech, no surprise she lost. The question I would love to know: has there ever been an incumbent beaten as badly as that in a primary in our nation's history? And yet she stood there and basically made the case that she wants to be the presidential candidate for the non-Trump portion of the party.
You know, she clearly has a right to run. I mean, it's not going to shock me at all. My expectations are that candidacy may raise some money, but I don't expect it to go anywhere. We've talked about this on the show many times, Richard. I mean, President Trump is likely to announce that he's going to run. I believe that to be the case. I don't think by any stretch he's going to be the only one to run. I think on our side, we're going to have a healthy debate. I fully expect Liz Cheney to run. I fully expect Mike Pence is going to run. The President Trump, former President Trump, I expect to run. A lot of the other names, Richard, kicked around: Mike Pompeo, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz from Texas, Ron DeSantis. I'm not, and Nikki Haley, I could be leaving out some obviously, but I'm not so certain any of those other parties are going to make a move until things sort of settle out with what former President Trump's going to decide to do. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's right. And to kind of add to what I said a minute ago, I think people don't understand that they follow Trump not because it's just him alone, right, but the message. Exactly. And he does not have to be the only messenger for that message. And that message will be there long after he and we are all gone, I believe, because I think the country's ready to move away from the career politicians and people in Washington that are the so-called swamp.
Yeah, and I concur with what you just said, Richard, because, you know, you've heard people say a lot of times, you know, Trump had the right policies. He didn't necessarily have the right demeanor. Okay, people like you and I can get over the demeanor as long as the policies are right. I mean, I'll take that 100 times out of 100 if a guy's got the right policies. I'm not one that really cares what the personality's like. But we have a situation now where, you know, let's analyze a little bit about last night. You know, Liz Cheney, as she stated in her speech, the last time she ran, she got 74%. And now she comes in at 32. And I'm saying, what changed? Well, Liz, what changed is you didn't just say you were against the president. You became the full throat, you know, speaker of the January 6th committee that, frankly, most people, a vast swath of Republicans have moved on from, and a big chunk of independents have moved on from. When you take positions like that, I don't know how you could expect to be any different. Lisa Murkowski, she advanced as expected. The way, you know, they have that ranked choice voting in Alaska, where, you know, I don't fully understand it, but so I won't try to tell our audience about it. But basically, you vote for 4 candidates, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they rank them. And Murkowski, she easily survived, and she's going to run up against Kelly. I think I'm pronouncing her name, Shibaka. They were separated by like 3 or 4 points. Shibaka is a true conservative along the Donald Trump wing of the party. Lisa Murkowski is what I would deem to be more of a center-left Republican, sort of the, I don't want to call her a traditional Republican, Richard. I think that's too much of a compliment, but she's from the left side of the Republican Party. I mean, I think I'm being generous there.
Well, she's from the swamp, which I'll define in a second. But it's interesting looking at the stacked ranking election in Alaska, the amount of rules in that election. It's so complicated. It's almost like a Common Core version of an election. Instead of having one person, one vote, you have all these different votes and you have these different formulas. It complicates everything, which makes it much easier for somebody to come in and commit fraud and steal something because of the complications. And we talk about the swamp a lot. And I ask people, have you ever heard the swamp defined? And I have my own definition because I want to be able to identify. And to me, the swamp is we're governed by career politicians, for career lobbyists, executed by career bureaucrats, and protected by career media people. And that's a syndicate. Until we break that, we will not be able to defeat the swamp.
Do you think that's the reason that most people believe that this raid on Trump's property at Mar-a-Lago was corrupt? I saw polls where Merrick Garland's polling rating is down in the mid-30s, about where Biden's was about 3 weeks ago. I bet you 2 months ago, 80% of the country couldn't tell you who Merrick Garland was. But he's been thrust into the spotlight with this thing. But it seems to me, Richard, a vast swath of Republicans do believe this is politically motivated. And there's a good chunk of independents that feel the same way, too. You've used the word swamp a lot. I'm going to get to that with your new book in a little bit. But it does seem rather swampy. 90 days before an election, and this happens. And I've said on this show all week, well, if it was so important, why did they wait 18 months to get this material back? No one's been able to explain that to me, and I'm certainly not going to get any fair commentary from the mainstream media or even the conservative media. They're keeping this thing pretty much under lock. How does this play out, Richard? I mean, I know you have some strong opinions on it.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And the interesting things to me are President Trump, they've been looking for things on him for 5 and 6 years now. Yep. And they've not found anything. And so that to me makes me think people are going to be more suspicious about accusations and what the government does. Then the second thing is transparency and will reveal the truth. And who wants to be transparent but President Trump? Who wants to hide information about this issue? The government, which again makes President Trump look better than the government does. Mm-hmm. And you cannot tell me that Merrick Garland on his own did this. Agreed. I believe that it had to be approved by the president or whoever's standing behind him pulling his string had to approve it, because an AG would not go after a political opponent because of the political implications of that. And that would have to go to the highest levels.
I concur with you completely. And it's not going to shock me at all if Ron Klain, the chief of staff, knew about it. It wouldn't shock me if Biden knew about it. They may have kept it from Biden so he had plausible deniability, but somebody in the White House, I guarantee it was cleared through someone, because Merrick Garland doesn't come across to me as a guy that would make a call like that. I mean, nothing against him personally, but you've seen the weaponization of the Department of Justice. I was somewhat concerned, disappointed a little bit, if you will, in Mike Pence's comments today about saying people should not be attacking the FBI or the DOJ. Well, I don't know. I mean, politically, of course you don't want to physically attack them. Don't anyone take this the wrong way. And we've talked about that. The people who are running their cars into barricades and killing themselves and trying to shoot up an FBI, we don't advocate that at all. But politically speaking, it does appear to me that, when you look and see, Senator Grassley said, well, hey, Hillary Clinton got the kid glove treatment. We still don't know what's going on Hunter Biden. And it seems like when it comes to Republicans, and I could go down the list, whether it's Paul Manafort, whether Peter Navarro, Roger Stone, and now President Trump, whenever the target's a Republican, it just seems like, they go take it to nuclear in the first inning versus when it's in a Democrat, they get kid gloves.
Well, yes. And the other evidence is the politicians always want to protect themselves and their careers. The bureaucrats are the same way. Yeah. And so they're not going to stick their neck out to make such a controversial decision unless they have cover from above. Yeah. And so to me, that's what's so important on this. And you're correct. And it just illustrates, I think the Republicans generally try to operate from a principle standpoint, but they're not as principled as I would like them to be. But on the other side of the aisle, it's all about the power. Right. It's all about now. There's no concern about doing something today that will hurt you later because they know they have air cover from the media, and people will not go back and report on something they did or said in the past. And that gives them an ability to go out and fabricate things and get away with it.
Richard, you've seen a lot of negative things going on in the swamp, whatever you want to call DC, and you actually took the time to write another book about the political environment in this country. Why don't you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about it, the title of the book? I know it hasn't even been released yet, but let's give them a perspective, because the events over the last couple weeks, and we were talking pre-show, I bet it encapsulates a lot of the topics you're talking about in your book. So give us a little sneak preview, if you will, of what you drafted there.
Well, thank you, Mark. The title of the book is Made in America by Americans, Not Americans. And it's not totally a political book. It's a book about the can-do spirit of America and how that's what made us great over the years. There's 46 individual essays that highlight over 250 people, places, and events. The word Democrat, big D, and the word Republican, big R, is not in there once, but the principles, the founding principles of our country and the things that made us great are in there. And it's divided into, the essays are divided into three sections: learning, learning and leading, learning, leading, and leaving a legacy. And so it's designed to help inspire and motivate people to pursue their dreams and let them know that the government's not there to help us pursue our dreams. The government's there to feed itself, and it subjects us. And I believe a strong Americans build a strong America. Strong government makes weak Americans.
Richard, when does the book come out?
It'll be released September 6th, 2022. It's available for pre-order today on Amazon.com.
And your website, can you order it through your webpage?
It'll be released on the webpage, richardbattle.com, on September 6th also, and everything from that site is our signed copies.
Well, I'll tell you what, folks, Richard has crafted some incredible books in the past, and given the way things are in this country right now, I love the title, Richard, What America Can Do versus Can't Do. I mean, that is one thing that it appears to me, that book, and again, I haven't read it because I haven't seen it yet, but you capture probably the spirit of the American can-do attitude, that there's nothing that Americans can't do if they put their minds to it.
Well, yes, because our forefathers have gone through much worse than we've gone through, and they came out of it and were successful. And so we can do the same thing, but it's our choice if we do that or not. And we have to have the optimistic spirit, and have to have the principles, and have to have the knowledge of what people before us did to be able to do that easier. And that's what I try to share, those tools and ideas to help people navigate that journey.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one. That's going to be a good read, Richard. Hey, I want to shift towards some practical things going on. We talked about elections and politics and some things happening in the country, and I'm not going to bore our viewers and listeners. We know that Biden signed the, I call it the Inflation Enhancement Act. The legal name is the Inflation Reduction Act. I cannot think of a worse name for a bill maybe ever, but I'm going to set that aside for right now. It's Biden signed it into law, and it is what it is. But let's talk about something actually happening across the country. It's affecting a lot of people. And Richard, it's really affecting citizens in the state of Texas. I mean, you've got that border crisis going on down there. And I know Governor Abbott implemented Operation Lone Star. Let's talk about that a little bit, because it seems to me the citizens of Texas finally got fed up to a point where maybe Governor Abbott, the legislature, the citizens said, do something. This thing's out of control. And from what I can see, Abbott is continuing to ship illegal immigrants on buses, up to sanctuary cities, New York, Washington, etc. Tell us what's going on the ground in Texas.
Well, Operation Lone Star was $3 billion budget to help defend the border, help build border wall, help imprison or put illegal aliens in jail or return them or bust them to DC or New York, or gosh, I hope they do it to many other cities as well, because there's been an inundation. And these people, especially when it's over 100 degrees, the story of them walking thousands of miles to get here in 100-degree heat, I think is a total fabrication. They walk some for the cameras, and then they are transported close to the border. There's a payment made to the cartels. You'll see them cross with wristbands. It's almost like they're going to an amusement park, and they don't cross without the protection and paying fees to the cartels. And if you look closely at the caravans, there's always American citizens from the NGOs or non-government organizations escorting them. And my big question that nobody's publicizing or investigating is who's paying for those people to be brought up. Most of those people don't have two nickels to rub together, much less pay a $3,000 fee to cross the border. So who's paying for them to come across the border? Because I can't believe the cartel's taking IOUs on all of them.
No, the cartels are not. You know it just as well as I do.
Yes, and so they're coming across several 100,000 every month. I mean, in the last day or so, just in the Eagle Pass area, there were 2,000 came across in large groups. And they're voluntarily giving themselves up. Right now, it's mostly single adults, not as many little kids, because the journey would be harder for them. And they're coming in, 98% of them need public assistance, and the local communities are assisting them. The federal government is shipping them all over the country as well. In the dark of night, they're shipping them to New York State. You've seen videos on that as well. It's only the governor of Texas that sent them to New York City.
Right.
But when they go into those communities, they're a national security threat, health security threat, and a financial security threat for that community, because the local community has to provide food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, schooling, all these things that those people can't do. And the question is, how many million are we going to let in before somebody says, stop, we can't afford this anymore?
Well, I'll amplify your figures a little bit. You had 199,000 in the month of July. That was just the people that Border Patrol either caught or they voluntarily just turned themselves in. There was another like 55,000 that they call them the getaways, the ones that just came in and they just escaped into the country. I want to give you some statistics. I hate doing this, but 2,000 pounds of fentanyl has been seized at that border. Richard, that makes 469 million doses. That's enough to kill every man, woman, and child in this country. 13,000 pounds of meth. So it's not just the human trafficking going on where the cartels are effectively, this has got to be an incredible money-making thing that effectively our government's an accomplice on. I hate to say that, but I can't think of a better word. And Mayorkas, the guy in charge of this, what a poor excuse. He has not supported those Border Patrol agents. The policy, everyone sees it's open border. And the state of Texas, I give it to credit to Abbott and the citizens, but this is a federal problem that has to be addressed. It cannot just be Texas and Arizona.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And the Texas border with Mexico is 1,254 miles long. And so when somebody puts that into perspective, it's a long border to defend. My hope, and I think the opportunity is, if enough states get upset about this, I think there's an opportunity for states to band together and fight against the federal government and reestablish more power with the states and a true federalism like we used to have and was originally intended when the Constitution. But since 1913, the federal government ever grabs more and more and more power and weakens the states and local communities.
Yeah, that's what's been happening. I said this too, and I was proved right about it. You know, Hispanic Americans, they want people to come in, but they want them to come in legally. And best evidence of that was all those blue congressional districts along the Rio Grande. Myra Flores comes out, and we've said for the last year that was trending from blue to red. Well, you had deep blue districts, Richard, that voted Republican. And I see poll after poll after poll of Hispanics turning away from the Democratic Party and all their wokeism and open borders and reckless spending. I could go on and on. And I think that utopian plan that the radical leftists had about turning the country more brown, I think it's backfiring on the Democrats.
Well, and first thing, when I was down the border a few months back, the Department of Public Safety officer that gave me the tour said they had intercepted people last year from 150 countries all over the world, including Russians and Ukrainians. So it's not just Hispanics. But first, I love to talk to naturalized citizens, and I like to ask them their opinion. And everyone I've ever spoken to, regardless of where they come from, always say these people ought to come legally like I did. Every one of them's against it.
Right.
The Hispanic people are very conservative, family-oriented, hardworking people. They are independent spirit. They're much more conservative than the Democrat Party is currently. And I think they're seeing firsthand how this is hurting them, depressing wages, costing them tax dollars.
Right. And
they've had enough of it as well because there's no benefit for them in this.
Yeah, I concur with you on that. And I mean, for the federal government basically to have this open border policy, people do not want it. And Richard, I'm optimistic that come October, November, when people go to the polls, we can get the results to make changes at the federal level. You mentioned the economic cost. I mean, we've seen gas and oil prices come down, but inflation is still running 40-year highs. I mean, we're in the 8% range. News came out of Great Britain that they're at 10.1% inflation. This problem is ravaging countries all across the globe. I pinpointed to the old economic axiom, too much money chasing too few goods. I mean, the federal government, literally, the balance sheet of the Fed went from $3 trillion to $9 trillion. And then you throw in that $1.9 trillion spending bill that Biden did as the first quarter he was in office. And then obviously I could fast forward to the new bill they just signed. But Richard, between the Federal Reserve and the Biden administration, isn't that the real cause of what's causing this inflation problem?
Well, that's absolutely correct. And a simplified number that I like to look at is 25% of the money in circulation has been created in the last 2 years.
That's true.
And so if we increase the money supply 25%, well, the normal result of that would be a 25% increase in prices to maintain that equilibrium.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing over time right now. And is the federal government reducing the money supply or reducing the balance sheet to bring it back down? No. I told my daughter, based on what I learned in the 70s, I said, don't expect the prices to go back where they were before. No. They'll be at a certain level they'll reach, and they'll stay there because that's been the history of our country the last 200 years. Yeah. The government inflates the currency because that reduces basically the cost of the existing debt.
Yeah, yeah. Now the Federal Reserve got that $9 trillion of debt the Fed has, which is gone down minuscule over the past 2 months. Supposedly in September, the Fed's going to start reducing that balance sheet, $90 billion a month. And the Fed came out in its statement earlier today and said they will continue to raise interest rates to get inflation under control. We hope they can orchestrate a soft landing. I have my doubts about that, given that they were part of the culprits that got us into this mess. But we'll keep an open mind to it and see. But we'll see if that $9 trillion balance sheet is reduced. I know one thing that happened, Richard. China's got some problems, and that's one of the main reasons oil prices have come down. People think, well, it's because Biden helped with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. No. The demand from China's economy only grew 0.4% last quarter. Very, very slow growth. And my opinion on this, Richard, if China says they grew 0.4, it was probably negative growth. Because you just can't trust the Chinese Communist Party. But they've got effectively flat growth over in China. They've got this insane zero COVID policy, which is going to hamper economic activity. And now they have a heat wave over there where the Chinese Communist Party is actually rationing electricity. Now, folks, the reason I'm telling you about what's happening in China doesn't have the insane policies to limit their energy production like we do in this country. I mean, no one's shuttering pipelines in China. China's building coal-fired plants, and China's basically taken an all-of-the-above approach. You give me wind, you give me solar, biofuels, you name it, we'll do it. Not like our country where we shut down pipelines, and I could get on and on. But even with all that, Richard, the demand for oil in China has fallen, and that's the main culprit, in my opinion, of why these prices have come down.
Well, I think you're correct, and you're correct on the all-above strategy as well, because if we try to force these green energy on people before the market's ready, it's going to create shortages. It's going to create price spikes. We're going to be rationed as well. As we saw in Texas a few months back, there was some concern about the grid going down and rolling blackouts. You've seen that in California for the exact same reason as well. And as somebody who grew up in the heat with no air conditioning, I don't want to go back there again. No. It was too hard. No. So we need the above approach. But the whole climate thing in my mind is a height of arrogance that anything we do can impact the climate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I mean, we passed this bill where we're going to be spending all this money on green energy. Okay, fine. All right. But the fact is, the Russians aren't doing one iota. The Chinese are actually building coal-fired plants and using whatever oil and natural gas they can get. Again, India, similar situation. India's building coal-fired plants. So to think that the United States is going to cut back on its energy use, when, as a matter of fact, energy use now is back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, Richard, I'm all for all the above. I mean, give me wind, give me solar, give me bioenergy. Natural gas is plentiful. We got 200 years of natural gas here in this country. We have plentiful sources. We were the largest oil producer in the world when President Trump was in office. So I'm a big believer in the all the above approach. And yet the Democratic Party, Richard, if we weren't having earlier this year $5 a gallon gas at national average, you'd have seen the Democratic Party doing everything they can to hamper our energy industry. And you're right in the center of it, right there in Texas.
Well, yes, and there's even a bigger picture, because we need low-cost energy to help our prosperity, our gross domestic product. And right now we have the largest economy in the world. And the threat from China is they want to have the largest economy in the world, and they want to take the dollar off as the world reserve currency.
Yep.
And in my opinion, that's the only thing that's keeping our economy propped up right now. And if China can convince other countries to go to the yuan and make it the reserve currency of the world, and ours isn't, that will cause economic havoc.
Yeah, and the Chinese could want nothing more than that, because that is, whether they state it or not, that is their economic goal. Richard, we got a couple minutes left. How, we're now 85 some odd days out until the midterms. How do you see things playing out? I'm not going to ask you to predict one way or another who's going to win an individual race, but talk to me about the trends and how you see things heading into the fall, given the current many issues we have in the country. And with a Biden approval rating, albeit it's come up, it's still about 40%, and he's about 15 points upside down.
Well, I think what's interesting is the administration now is trying to do some things to make themselves look better to the electorate. And we're going to see more and more of that. The signing of the big oil lease yesterday or today, whenever he signed that, was one indicator of it. So I think we're going to see them throw bones to the voters. Hopefully the voters will be smarter than that and realize that the impact of what we're experiencing is directly caused by the administration. And it's interesting to me as I watch individual candidates. They'll run as a Democrat and say, I'm going to go up there and represent my district.
Right.
And they go up there, and the first thing that happens is Mother Nancy hits them over the fingers with a ruler and says, all right, you're going to do what I tell you or else. And what we've denigrated to in the last several years has been not where people go up and represent their districts, but they go up and basically the majority and minority leaders in both houses of Congress run everything.
Yeah.
And with very rare exception, they are the ones making all the decisions, which is not the representative republic that we're set up to be. And so anything we can do to defund the congressional and Senate campaign committees and to put the power back into individual elected leaders who have real world experience, I'm for.
Well, Richard, that's a good closing commentary right now. And I think you're right about that. A lot of the American people, they do want to see the swamp drain. I have a suspicion. I think that come November, October, November, I still firmly believe the Republicans will take back the House. I've said it's going to be closer than people anticipate. The Senate literally could go either way. I mean, I saw a poll yesterday that said Congressman Val Demings is ahead of Marco Rubio in Florida. People I've talked to in the Rubio campaign say our internals don't show that. But again, Florida elections are tight. So I think it's going to be tight all around the country. I mean, we had Leora Levy on, who won the primary in Connecticut. Dick Blumenthal, he's underwater. He's 45% approval. I think, Richard, we could see some shocks on both sides of it. So I don't want to predict things. And 80, 85 days out, that's an eternity in politics. People are going to be voting in like 55, 60 days, with advanced voting. So I believe what you said there. I hope the American people see through the representations that the Biden administration's made. And I go back to that old Ronald Reagan quote, are you better off now than you were before? And we all know what the answer to that was. Hey, Richard, Absolutely. Thank you for joining me today. And again, close it out with your book again, the name of your book and when they can get it.
My pleasure. The new book will be Made in America by Americans, not Americants, released September 6th. Available for pre-order on Amazon currently. Website's richardbattle.com. Again,
Richard, thank you for joining me today. All the best with the book. And folks, thank you for viewing and listening. Lots of hot topics, but we're going to stay on top of them as we cut through the propaganda. Stay safe, have a good evening, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.